Forgot to record. I forgot to record, but we're here now. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about experimental drawing, and I'll maybe define that a little bit more later. I'll show you some examples of what my experiments have looked like today. What am I, Thomas Edison? He's got experiments? Hopefully he patents them. I know what you're thinking. So I've talked a little bit about the creative constipation that led me to just experimenting with some new materials and techniques and styles and stuff. And while I was doing that, I came across this horror movie called His House on Netflix, which is a British movie, a haunted house movie. Creature effects, creature design, special effects, makeup really struck a nerve and inspired me. That's lesson number one. Always be on the lookout for that inspiration and be ready to pounce. As an artist, you gotta be like a panther. You're sitting on that branch. Sometimes things aren't working out for you. You're a sad panther. Sad panther on a perch. But, sometimes that tasty prey animal comes walking by and you gotta be ready to pounce on it. So I did. This one's on the back of just this was the inside of a picture frame, and I spray painted the picture and it left a nice little square. This experimenting has kind of gone back to what I've spent a lot of time doing with my art, which is expressive, sometimes fantastic portraits. It's just trying to use some materials non-traditionally. These are just some more examples. This book is a mixed book. Some of this stuff is not from my latest kick. I gotta say, I'm a little self-conscious about my daggers for fingernails that I have. I made this sketchbook. I looked up a YouTube video about how to sew and bind a sketchbook, and I made one, and it's my favorite sketchbook. Which is another part of the experimenting process. I mean, it's not just the materials that you put on the surface, it's what is the surface. Sometimes use the insert of a picture frame. Everything has potential. These are art boards, Canton art boards. Wish that A, you could find a smaller one, and B, it came with more pages, but I really like the Canton art boards. And this is Arch's paper, and this was a splurge. I mean, this is some fancy watercolor paper, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but I love it. I think that's worth the extra that you pay for it. You can tell the quality. So I'll show you a little bit how I experiment. This is a brush pen. I thought it was going to be waterproof, and then I did this watercolor painting with it, and then I started to do the outline with this pen. Then I realized I had to, touch up some other spots on the painting with the watercolor, and this pen just bleeds. It's not waterproof. So this leads to this idea, which is called oops, but wait. You find out that the pen you thought was waterproof, and it's not. Oops, but wait. What can you do with that? Well, you can kind of use it like watercolor. Do the dark shadows with the pen, and then run some water along it, and just let the ink bleeding into the water create the midtones for you. Another important thing to remember when you're experimenting with mediums and stuff is that it's always good to start from a place of curiosity. Obviously, you buy a pen or something and you do have expectations for what it's going to do. You buy a certain color, of course you want it to be that color, but having an open mind, being curious, I think is the best approach to this method. I made a video about how nice it is to have a nice pen, and I kind of made it seem like you shouldn't have any crappy pens. I think that could be interpreted from the video. Au contraire, I think that you should try everything. I specifically went out and bought just a ton of different types of pens. Some of them I didn't even look at what they were. I just threw them in the basket. But like with the non-waterproof brush pen, this ink is also not waterproof. So let's see what color it is when we apply some water to it. Uniball pens are one of my favorite pens. I love really fun pen to draw with, and you can get them really fine. Pens have different ingredients in the ink, and the ingredients make the ink different colors. Those colors really come out when you add water to them if they're not waterproof. So I'm basically Leonardo Da Vinci. I'm experimenting. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Leonardo da Vinci. Like, I loved the idea that there was this Italian guy named Leonardo making beautiful paintings and coming up with insane inventions. Just crazy ideas. Flying suits, crazy military gear. I loved it. But Leonardo, he would experiment all the time. There's one story about how he did this mural of a battle scene, I think. And he was like really far into it too, and got this idea to experiment with candles to see if he could make the oil paint dry faster. And it just destroyed the whole thing. But there's just something you gotta respect about a guy that's getting deep into this mural. It's not like today where you just go to the paint store and my experiment didn't work, so I'll just go back to the paint store. You had people making the paint. You were making your own brushes. It was just such a time and resource rich process that to be like, hey, oil paint, I don't like how slow oil paint dries. We should just put candles next to it. I mean, there's just something admirable about that. I like it when people try something and don't really care if it's not going to work. I'm sure he cared whether or not it worked. I'm sure he wanted it to work. But the fear of it not working just didn't faze him as much. At least from what I gather from reading about him. I've always had this irrational dislike of colored pens. If you're not using a black pen, what are you doing? And so I specifically went out of my way to get red pens. That's probably one of the biggest happy discoveries I came across with this experimentation process, is the way that these red pens look when you add a little bit of water to them. They look like watercolors, but and then there's also like, you can still see some of it gives the lines like a ghost-like quality almost. So in addition to just buying every pen I could, I also got a bunch of different types of gel pens and paint pens as well. My favorite part of working on the toned brown paper was adding the highlights. So let's just do a quick little portrait study and test some of these guys out. Gel pens, Posca pen, fine nib. I really like this one. Montana acrylic markers. I got a like ultra fine point and then I don't know, a regular fine point. And I like pens and markers as opposed to like painting supplies because you don't have to wash off a brush afterwards or something. You can more or less just put everything away and stop. You don't have to like do dishes essentially. So I have 2 full-blown drawings that I've recorded myself doing, and I started editing them all into this one video, and it just became way too long, so I'm gonna split it up into 3 parts. So this was part 1. In part 2 next week, I'll do a full-blown sketchbook drawing using some of these different methods and techniques that I've talked about. I hope you've gotten something out of this video, and I'm excited to show you the next one. Thank you.